What happens when a CEO is humiliated in his own store? When the empire he built, the business he poured his heart into, turns into a place where he is treated like he doesn't belong? Michael Carter walked into one of his own stores, expecting nothing more than good service. But what he got? Disrespect, dismissal, a reality check he never saw coming. The employees didn't know who he was. They saw a black man in casual clothes and made their decision instantly. He wasn't worth their time. They refused to help him. They pointed him toward the clearance rack. They laughed, assuming he couldn't afford what was on the shelves. But what happens when the man they just judged is the one who owns everything around them? Today, those employees were about to learn a painful lesson. Because this wasn't just any customer. This was their CEO, and their jobs were on the line. This isn't just a story about bad service. It's a wake-up call about prejudice, power, and what happens when you judge the wrong person. And for the employees who made that mistake, it's a day they'll never forget. Michael Carter sat in his office, his fingers drumming against the polished mahogany desk, his eyes locked on the glowing screen in front of him. Emails, hundreds of them. At first, they had been easy to brush off. A bad review here, a frustrated customer there. But now they were impossible to ignore. Each complaint told a different story, yet they all carried the same chilling pattern. The staff barely acknowledged me. I asked for help and got eye rolls instead. They treated me like I didn't belong. And then there was the worst of them. One that made Michael's stomach tighten as he read it again. I watched them treat one customer like royalty, and another like they were a problem just for existing. Guess which one was black? He exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples, frustration simmering beneath his normally composed demeanor. This wasn't just bad service. It was something deeper, a pattern, a toxic culture taking root in the very company he had built from the ground up. His company, the same company that, from day one, had been founded on inclusivity. The same company he had personally ensured was a place where everyone, no matter their background, no matter their appearance, felt welcome. At least, that's what he thought. But now, it seemed his own employees had created an environment that went against everything he stood for. Michael had options. He could send out a memo. He could arrange a company-wide meeting, talk about values and mission statements, maybe even enforce another round of diversity training. But what would that really do? Words weren't enough anymore. People acted differently when they knew they were being watched. They adjusted their smiles when the boss walked in. They fixed their posture when corporate sent a mystery shopper. Michael needed to see the truth, not the rehearsed version. The real version. And the only way to do that? Go undercover. That night, as the city's skyline stretched beyond his office window, the decision settled in his bones. No assistance, no expensive suit, no grand entrance, just a hoodie, sneakers, a man walking into his own store. As a customer. He didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was certain. After this, nothing would ever be the same. The next morning, Michael Carter stepped out of his car, dressed in a simple hoodie and jeans. No designer labels, no expensive watch, just an average customer, blending into the city's morning rush. Michael took a slow step inside, letting his eyes scan the store. Everything looked perfect. The displays were immaculate, the lighting warm and inviting. Every product was exactly where it should be. It was his vision, brought to life. But something felt off. He watched as a well-dressed white man entered just moments after him. Immediately, a cheerful employee walked up, flashing a warm smile. "Welcome, sir. Let me know if there's anything I can help you with today." The customer nodded, clearly feeling valued. Michael waited for someone to approach him. No one did. The employee who had just been so welcoming walked right past him without so much as a glance. Another worker was adjusting a display nearby. He made brief eye contact, but turned away, just as fast, as if Michael wasn't worth the effort. Michael had been in retail long enough to know the difference between a busy staff and deliberate avoidance. This wasn't about workload. This was about judgment. Still, he gave them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they were just distracted. Maybe someone would step up and do their job. He walked up to the front desk, where a young woman, her name tag read Rachel, was leaned over the counter, tapping away on her phone. Michael waited. She didn't look up. He cleared his throat. Nothing. Finally, he spoke. "Excuse me, I need some help finding a suit." Rachel barely moved. Without lifting her eyes from her screen, she muttered, "Clearance section is in the back." Michael's brow lifted slightly. Clearance. He hadn't mentioned price. He hadn't even said what kind of suit he was looking for. She had assumed, without hesitation, without thought, that whatever he needed, it couldn't be from the premium section. For the first time, a slow, sinking realization started settling over him. But he wasn't done testing. "I'm actually looking for something from the premium collection," he said evenly. That's when she finally looked up, but not with respect, with doubt. Her eyes scanned his hoodie, his sneakers, the way he carried himself. The slight smirk on her lips was subtle, but it said everything. She didn't believe him. "You sure?" she said, half laughing. "Those suits are, really expensive." Michael stared at her, his face unreadable. There it was. Not just avoidance, not just disinterest, disrespect. She had sized him up in less than a second and decided he wasn't worth her time, that he didn't belong in this store and she wasn't the only one. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed another employee standing nearby. A young man, maybe early 20s. He was watching, smirking, amused by what was unfolding. Michael turned to him. "Maybe you can help me." The smirk widened into a grin. Yeah," the young man said, mocking politeness. "Like she said, clearance is in the back." Michael clenched his jaw for a brief second. There it was, the silent but loud message. "You don't belong here. You're not worth our time. Go somewhere else." Michael felt something burn inside him, not just for himself, but for every customer who had walked into the store and been made to feel like this. How many people had left feeling humiliated? How many had been turned away without ever knowing why? But he didn't react. Not yet. Instead, he simply nodded. "I'll wait." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Suit yourself," and with that, she turned away. They had no idea what they had just done. Michael stood there, waiting, watching. The employee who had just dismissed him had returned to her phone, scrolling like nothing had happened. The other employees continued chatting amongst themselves, assisting well-dressed customers while he stood there like he was invisible. He could feel it now, the silent bias, the quiet dismissal. But instead of walking out, instead of revealing who he was just yet, he decided to wait. He wanted to see how far they would take this. A well-dressed man in a tailored suit walked in. Immediately, one of the employees rushed over. "Welcome, sir. Let me know if you need help finding anything," they chirped, their tone suddenly bright, full of energy. Michael's stomach twisted. So, that's how it was? He decided to try again. He walked up to another employee, a young man, standing near the register and asked a simple question. "Can I get some help finding a suit?" The employee barely looked at him. His answer was short, dismissive. "Yeah, suits are over there." No offer to assist. No interest in making a sale. Michael nodded. "Can you help me pick something out?" The employee sighed, rubbing the back of his neck like this was the biggest inconvenience of his day. "I mean, do you even know what you're looking for?" Michael kept his patience in check. "I'd like something from the premium collection," the employee scoffed, laughed. "Yeah, Those are pretty expensive. Michael's jaw tightened. He had heard enough. He wasn't just being ignored. He was being profiled. They assumed, without even knowing who he was, that he didn't belong here, that he couldn't afford what was on the shelves, that his presence wasn't worth their time. Michael felt a slow burn rise in his chest. How many customers had they treated like this? How many people had walked in, ready to spend money, only to be pushed away because of an employee's assumptions? And worse, how long had this been happening under his nose? But he wasn't going to explode. He wasn't going to raise his voice. Number. He had something much better planned. Taking a deep breath, he reached into his pocket and made a call. The store manager needed to be here. Now, the energy in the store shifted the moment Michael made the call. His voice, calm but commanding, sent a ripple through the space. The employees who had ignored him, who had laughed at him, suddenly looked up, noticing the quiet authority in his tone. "Yeah, this is Michael Carter," he said into the phone. "I need the store manager on the floor. Now." The employee who had dismissed him, the same one who scoffed at the idea of him affording the premium collection, suddenly stiffened. His face paled slightly, his fingers twitching nervously. Rachel, the woman who had first waved him off, took a step closer, confused. "Wait, who are you calling?" Michael didn't even glance at her. He simply slid his phone back into his pocket and waited. Moments later, a door at the back of the store swung open, and the store manager, an older man with neatly pressed clothes and an air of authority, rushed out, looking around. The moment his eyes landed on Michael, his entire expression changed. His posture straightened, his eyes widened, and for a split second, pure panic flashed across his face. "Mr. Carter," his voice cracked slightly as he hurried forward. "Sir, I didn't know you were coming today." Michael folded his arms, his face unreadable. "Neither did they," he said, nodding toward the employees who had ignored him. The room went silent. Rachel's eyes darted between Michael and the manager. "Wait, Mr. Carter?" she repeated, her voice shaky. "As in—" Michael turned to face her fully now. "As in the man who owns this entire company." The color drained from her face. The young employee who had laughed at him took an unconscious step backward, his confidence from moments ago completely gone. No one moved. No one spoke. Michael let the silence stretch. Let them sit in their discomfort. Then, in a voice that was calm, yet sharper than steel, he asked, "Tell me, Rachel, why was I ignored the second I walked in?" Rachel opened her mouth, but no words came out. Michael didn't let her off the hook. He turned to the young man. "Why did you assume I couldn't afford the suits here?" The employee swallowed hard, his hands shaking slightly. I didn't mean—" "Didn't mean what?" Michael interrupted. "Didn't mean to judge me? Didn't mean to profile me?" Rachel stammered. I thought—" Michael raised an eyebrow. "Thought what?" "That I didn't belong." She said nothing. Because what could she say? The store manager looked ready to collapse from embarrassment. "Sir, I can assure you, this does not reflect the company's values." Michael let out a humorless chuckle. "Doesn't it?" he asked. "Because from where I'm standing, this is exactly what my customers have been complaining about." Another wave of silence. The employees looked at each other, realization dawning too late. They had been caught, exposed. Michael inhaled deeply before delivering his final words. "Rachel, you're fired, effective immediately." Rachel let out a strangled gasp, her eyes widening in horror. "Wait, please." Michael didn't flinch. "And you," he said, turning to the young employee who had laughed at him. "You can turn in your badge before the day ends. Because this," he gestured around the store, "this isn't how we treat people." The store manager remained frozen, nodding rapidly. "Understood, sir." Michael let his words settle. Then, in a voice low but firm, he added, "This changes today." And with that, the lesson had been delivered. The reality had been exposed. Now it was time to rebuild what had been broken. The store remained eerily silent. The weight of what had just happened hung thick in the air. The employees who had once carried themselves with arrogance now stood motionless, realizing too late the consequences of their actions. Michael turned to the store manager, his voice measured but firm. "This isn't just about two bad employees," he said. "This is about a culture problem, a problem that has been happening right under your nose." The manager swallowed hard, nodding, knowing there was no excuse, no justification for what had happened. Michael exhaled slowly. "If this is how I was treated, the owner, then I can only imagine how many customers have walked out of here feeling disrespected, unwelcome, and unheard." This wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was a reflection of something much deeper, something that had been allowed to fester in his company. And Michael knew that if he didn't address it right now, right here, it would only continue to happen. "Effective immediately," Michael continued. "Every employee in this company will undergo mandatory customer service and bias training. Every single store will have mystery shoppers reporting directly to me. And if I ever hear about another customer being treated the way I was treated today..." He let his words hang for a moment before finishing. "They won't just lose their job. They'll never work in retail again." The message was clear. The culture would change, or they would leave. Rachel, still standing there, her face pale with shock, finally whispered, I didn't mean to be rude." Michael's gaze locked onto hers, his expression unreadable. "But you were," he said simply. "And you weren't just rude, you were biased. You looked at me and decided who I was before I even spoke. And that is why you're standing here with nothing left to say." She lowered her head, shame washing over her. Michael turned away, his focus now on the future. "We will not be a company that treats customers differently because of assumptions. We will not ignore people just because they don't fit someone's idea of what wealth or success looks like." The employees, the store manager, even the customers who had gathered to watch, all of them were listening now. Michael glanced around the store one last time before turning to the manager. "Get your team together," he said. "Starting tomorrow, we rebuild the right way." The manager nodded quickly, already taking notes. As Michael walked toward the exit, he noticed something. A few customers clapped softly. A few nodded in approval. Some whispered to each other, realizing they had just witnessed a moment that would change the store forever. And as he stepped outside, taking in the fresh air, he felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about a bad experience. This was about holding people accountable, about standing up for those who had been mistreated before him, about making sure that no one, no matter what they looked like, where they came from, or how they dressed, ever felt unwelcome in his stores again. Because at the end of the day, success isn't about the money you make. It's about the values you uphold. And today, Michael had sent a message loud and clear. Respect isn't optional. It's required for everyone. At the heart of this story lies a lesson that goes beyond a single store, a single mistake, or even a single company. It's about how we choose to treat people. Every day, people are judged, not by their character, not by their actions, but by assumptions, by the way they look, by the clothes they wear, by the false ideas others create in their minds. But here's the reality. Respect isn't something that should be earned based on appearances. It's something that should be given to everyone, automatically. Michael Carter had the power to hold these employees accountable. But how many people walk into stores, restaurants, or workplaces and face this kind of bias without any way to fight back? And that's the real question. How many times has this happened to you? Have you ever been judged unfairly? treated differently just because of how you looked, how you dressed, or where you came from? Or have you ever been on the other side? Have you ever caught yourself assuming something about a person without realizing it? Let's talk about it. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced something like this? Do you think businesses are doing enough to prevent bias in customer service? Because this isn't just one man's story. This is a reality that too many people face every day. And if we want to change it, it starts with us.